My name is Ming Chen. You might know me from a little TV show called Comic Book Men. But this panel is not about me. This panel is about the man to my left, a legend. You know him as the co-creator of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but he's also the pride of Portland, Maine. He's also a Comic Book Men alumni, which I'm very proud of. But ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Kevin Eastman, everybody. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. This is our third trip here to Kansas City to hang out with you awesome people. We came in 2017, 2019, and thrilled to be back here again with you all. And so as long as they keep inviting us, we're going to keep coming and annoying you. So thanks for making us feel so welcome. And it's cool to be here.
I don't think you're annoying anybody, although I met a dude who's like, oh, I had to wait an hour in the Kevin Eastman line. I went, an hour? That's it? Like, that's like nothing. Like, 10-hour, 11-hour lines in San Diego. Like, come on, man. Like, that's an hour. You guys got lucky here in Kansas City.
Well, most of the people in my line are paid. My wife goes and pays them to stay. Pretend you're really interested to be here to draw from.
Wow, you're giving away a lot of the.
Sorry. That's all right.
Yeah, that's a lot of. Yeah, they just sell a lot of comics and toys to make up that. Don't pay them. You don't need to pay them.
No, but we do. We appreciate it. And I always say that I like to start these shows by saying thank you very much. We love doing shows. Over the last 10 years, Courtney and I have done probably 150 shows. And we get such wonderful energy from you guys. I have the greatest job ever because I have the greatest fans ever. So getting to come out and say thank you in person. And like I said, I joked that I wouldn't stand in line to meet me, and I appreciate that you guys will. So you're the best, and I love you, and thank you. So I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, guys. So I have a little anecdote here. So we've been doing a recap podcast about Comic Book Men, because that's what you do when you have your own TV show and you get canceled. You go back and you record podcasts about the glory days. And so we hit season 4, episode 6, entitled Turtle Time, in which you come on and you bring out the very first turtle drawing that you ever did. Yep. It's encased in like 8 inches of bulletproof glass. You also had the original layouts that you did for the first issue, which I thought was fascinating as well. But I got grilled. If you watch Comic Book Man, I got made fun of a lot.
I don't know. I love that show, you guys. I don't know. Maybe that was. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, and so I remember I'd never met you before, so they're like, "Hey, Kevin Eastman's coming in." I'm like, "Oh, wow, cool, okay." So I went and I Googled your image to see what you look like. And I found a lot of images of you all in black wearing sunglasses.
Yes.
And I was like, whoa, this guy's a badass, man. So I got really intimidated. I was like, yeah, I didn't know if you were going to be like, I was like, man, this guy must be like, like just a badass. Like, I didn't know if you were going to be nice. Like, you just looked like, maybe you would give us a hard time. And then you came in, you were like the nicest guy ever. I'm like, okay. Those
crashing the place.
Yeah.
I was going through my Neil Gaiman period. Where
was that the Neil Gaiman look?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always tell because I've known Neil a long time, and I'm a huge fan of Neil. The first time I met him at a show in London, he had like tan khakis, like a white polo shirt, and it was just as he was breaking it, before he even got Sandman, he was writing a few bits and pieces of other comics.
Yeah.
So it was just very preppy, very nice,
right.
Sort of clean cut. And the next time I see him, he's like all in black sunglasses, black leather jacket, black pants. I'm like, oh, that's it.
Wow, I was like, I don't even know you anymore, Neil. Like, what happened? Like Sandman.
Anyway, no, that was a really fun show. We get to show I'm a hoarder of sorts in that pretty much every doodle, every drawing, even from the earliest days that Peter and I started working together, I would save everything. And it was just, it meant something to me. And so things like the very first turtle drawing or the very first layouts or all these sketches that, here we are coming up on 40 years. 40 years next year.
No.
Guys, it's your fault. It's all your fault.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I blame you.
But it's just funny to look back on some of that stuff and with such great memories and fondness, and then you look like, wow, I could actually draw back then, kind of okay.
I think you still got some talent left.
Thanks.
Yeah, so this is a very audience-driven panel. I could ask all the questions, but I already got my opportunity to fanboy. So if you do have a question, shoot up your hand. I think we have he's got a mic here, he'll run it over, or you can just yell your question out. I do have one question, sure. And feel free to answer it or not, but I've always wondered, so you and Peter one day come up with the concept of the turtles.
Yeah.
You make that first turtle drawing, and you guys are kind of laughing over it, and I believe you described it as Bruce Lee as an animal, and what was kind of like the slowest, like lamest animal you could come up with.
Yep.
and it was a turtle. My question is, how high were you guys? What strain were you smoking? And it's legal here in Missouri, correct? So we can answer this, or you don't have to. But I know you guys are blue collar guys, boiling lobsters, and maybe kicking it back after a day. And
it's funny because my honest reply to that question, as many times I've been asked it over the years.
Yes.
Is that we couldn't even afford drugs back then.
Okay, that's what I figured. So.
But no, just to give you it's funny that we're coming up on 40 years, and to give you a tiny bit of a backstory, then we'll get into some questions. Because in the past I've done like slideshows and history, and then I talk too much, and my wife reminds me I talk too much sometimes. But I would like talk a little bit of history. But then to me the most fun is hearing what you guys want to ask and know about that you don't know. So that's the question part is really fun for me. But as Ming said, the turtles really started as a joke. Peter and I were sharing a house that he was renting, him and his wife were renting in Dover, New Hampshire. And this is 1983. I just got done cooking lobsters for the summer at the place I worked in called Johnny's Oarweed in Gunkwit, Maine. And Peter and I decided to form a studio called Mirage Studios, which was a mirage. It was our living room. We teamed up and sent samples to everybody trying to get work from anybody that would hire us, and so we got that, this stack of rejection letters that kept growing. And our true love was always, we shared a mutual hero, a mutual icon that we bonded over immediately, which was Jack Kirby. And since we were kids, it's all we ever wanted to do is write and draw and tell our own stories. And so we kept coming up with this idea and that idea, and pretty stupid. Not that this one didn't seem any less stupid at the time, but I wanted to make Pete laugh one night, and so I thought to myself, if Bruce Lee was an animal, what would be the stupidest animal? It'd be like fast-moving martial artist, slow-moving turtle. And I grew up in Maine, and there was turtles everywhere. I loved these little miniature dinosaurs. And so I did this turtle standing upright. He had a mask on, nunchuck strapped to his arms. And I put it on his desk, and I said, this is going to be the next big thing, a ninja turtle. And the reaction was as I hoped. He laughed, and he loved it. So he did a sketch changing a few things, which made me laugh. And then studio one-upmanship, So I said, well, if one, why not a group of them, Fantastic Four, X-Men, something like that. So I did this sketch and pencil, 4 turtles, each with different weapons, in this kind of cover-like pose. And I did this comic booky logo that said Ninja Turtles. And then when he did the final ink work on it, he added Teenage Mutant to the title. And we looked at it, we said, this is the dumbest thing we've ever seen. And we love it. And so we didn't have any, as I love to say, we didn't have any distracting paying work going on. I worked at a restaurant, I worked at a hotel, I worked in an art store. And so we said, let's come up with a story that tells you how these characters became the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And so we put every idea in the kitchen sink into this concept, all the things we loved about comics. We were quite positive nobody was ever going to buy a copy, to be honest. And so we wrote it solely and specifically for ourselves. We wrote the kind of comic we thought was funny, what we found interesting, and we choreographed it into a 40-page story. And then in an early form of crowdfunding, I had an uncle that sold art supplies, and we invited him over to the house and showed him this business plan of if we could borrow $1,000, this is how we would pay him back in 10 to 15 years. And my Uncle Quentin graciously wrote us a check for, he actually wrote a check for $1,000, but we said if you can give us an extra $200, we can buy an ad in this comic magazine called The Comics Buyer's Guide to let people know this comic actually exists. And we're glad we got that extra $200 because through the Comics Buyer's Guide, which was a main kind of a newspaper that went to all different comic stores around the country, we started getting calls from comic stores saying, well, we'd like to buy some of your comics. And we're like, really?
Ooh, yeah.
So to our surprise, within a couple of weeks, the first 3,000 copy printing sold out. We then, before we paid my uncle back, we were still getting orders, so we printed another 6,000. And this is in the summer of 1984. By then, I was already back cooking lobsters for the summer. You grew up in New England, it's like you work Memorial Day to Labor Day to make enough money to survive the winters up there. And so we printed another printing, and then as we eased into that fall of '84, this even more surprising thing happened is people kept writing and saying, well, when are you going to do a second issue? And we were like, we never thought the first issue would sell. And so we were thrilled that you guys want us to do another one. So we started working on the second issue in May of '84, solicited through the comic book distribution system. In January of '85, we got orders for 15,000 comics. We just about lost our mind because Pete did some quick calculations and figured, you know, if we do 6 of these a year, we'll make about $2,000 each pre-tax. We can eat all the macaroni and cheese we want, pay our rent, and draw comics full time. So May of 1985, I quit every other odd job. Peter did the same. We started drawing comic books, and that is coming up on 40 years ago. Crazy.
Living the dream, man. Living the dream. That's awesome.
Like I said, it's all your fault.
Yes. Thank you for entertaining that question. I know you get it a lot. But,
no, I love it. No, because it's quite a, you know, I look at it sometimes, and sometimes you see that kind of thing, and you feel like you're outside of yourself looking back in.
Yeah, it's like, how did this happen?
Yeah.
And, it's like, you know what? Because you did what you loved, and it worked out.
Yeah,
so.
it was really a crime of passion that we just loved comics so much, and that's all we ever wanted to do. To the point when, and Pete was the same. It's like when he would tell his mom and dad that he wants to follow in the footsteps of Jack Kirby when he gets older, and both our parents, mine and his, had this look like, oh, we're going to have one of those kids that never moves out of the basement. He wants to draw comic books. Oh my God, where did we go wrong?
Amazing. We're going to kick it off with this young gentleman over here. Your question.
What's your non-turtle favorite character?
Non-turtle favorite character that you like
Man.
working on?
Like say outside of Turtles universe, like, or within the Turtles universe, because
Outside the 4 turtles.
Outside the
Turtles
four
universe.
turtles.
Outside the 4 turtles? Oh man, because it's like, you know, like when I was growing up, I was a huge fan of all kinds of comics, and Daredevil and Batman were some of my favorites. And so that was sort of the inspiration that brought the idea that we create the Turtles in this New York City like setting, Gotham, New York City setting. So every character that we created, we brought into the Turtle universe were inspired enough so that we didn't get sued by other characters in the universe. So characters like in the Turtle universe, one of my favorites is, April O'Neil was added in issue 2, and she was the first strong female character that Peter and I wanted to put into the story. We both loved our Sigourney Weavers and Sarah Connors, and we wanted this strong sort of sister figure to balance out the 4 goofball brothers. But then shortly thereafter, we came up with a character named Casey Jones. And Casey Jones was one of my favorites creations because we wanted a character that was, Casey's sitting over there.
Yeah.
Casey was, I envisioned him, and Pete and I envisioned him to be a little bit crazier than Raphael, and we had this idea that, well, if Raphael met somebody, because Raphael's kind of a crazy one, as you know, and if Raphael met somebody crazier than him, would it make him look inward a little bit? Maybe say, well, maybe I should reel it back a little bit. But they, of course, they bonded. They became like, long lost brothers or goofballs, and they weren't beating each other up. They were beating bad guys up. So I'd say, April being a favorite, Casey being a favorite, and I love that we were able to continue building up the Turtles universe through many books. Characters like the Triceratons, the little squishy Krang characters and stuff. We had way too much fun doing all of them.
Great question. Over here, we got one over here in the front row. With the ears here, he's gonna run a microphone over.
He can't run.
Okay. Walk. He's gonna walk it. Sorry.
Quick step.
What's your favorite Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle?
Oh, that's a good question because it's tough. Because I grew up in a good-sized family, and I keep reminding my mom that I was always the favorite. I'm kidding.
Of course.
Of course. She was like, "Yeah, this one's going to prison." No, so when you have a family like we have with the 4 Turtles, it's very hard to pick your favorite because I love them all equally. Speaking for both, Peter and myself. But when pressed on it, people go like, "Well, if you have to pick one, who would you pick?" And I would point to Michelangelo only because he was the first one I drew, first one ever drawn. And so I'd lean towards Mikey just because he's firstborn, but we love them all. And that's the fun part about when you get to write different stories and adventures with all of them or one of them individually. Really nice to explore their personalities. Yeah, good question.
Thank you. One of those, right behind you.
Can't see him, he's a ninja.
I know. Can we hear him though, or her?
What were the original names for the turtles, and how did you come up with the names?
That's a great question. No, that was when we were, I got another funny story that goes along with this. When we were going along with the, coming up with the story that tells how these characters became the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, we took different pieces of, even part of the Turtles' origin is Daredevil's origin in many respects. And if you don't know Daredevil's origin, it was young Matt Murdock as a character when he was young. There's a blind man stepping into the street as a truck barreling down the street carrying radioactive waste, which happens all the time in New York, as we know.
Of course.
So young Matt Murdock jumps out to save this blind man. The truck locks up its brakes. This canister comes loose and hits him near the eyes, which causes him to lose his sight and enhance his powers, which then he becomes Daredevil. And I love Daredevil, but they never said what happened to the canister after it hit Matt Murdock. So in the Turtle story, the canister continues bouncing down the street, and this poor kid is standing next to an open sewer, holding a terrarium with 4 turtles in it. Canister hits the thing, smashes all, goes down the sewer with his rat. So Daredevil was an inspiration for, Marvel never sued us, thank goodness, for the origin. And then we had, also from Daredevil, the Turtles' father's name is Splinter, and Daredevil, he had a mentor named Stick. The evil clan of ninjas that he fights is called the Hand. We have the Foot. See where this is going? They should have sued us, man.
No, it's not similar at all.
No, that's completely different. Hand, foot.
Yeah, you don't have arches or arcs. Yeah, the other set's got sesame seeds. We don't have none of that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
The other favorite, and I'll get to the names in a second. The other favorite was in the development of the idea. And this is where there are no stupid ideas, and the origin of the Shredder. So Janine made Peter and I dinner one night. We're doing dishes, Pete's washing, and I'm drying, and I'm drying one of those rectangular cheese graters. And so I was reaching up, I was drying the inside, and there's a little handle on it. So I had the handle on it, so the cheese grater's here. And I'm going like, man, could you imagine a bad guy that had this as a weapon? He would shred your skin off. And Pete goes, Shredder! So the Shredder came from doing dishes.
So great.
And then working on the names, because of the Asian martial arts base of the history, originally we wanted something very authentic and very traditional, and then we felt, God, it's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it's so stupid. Doug, Bob, Steve, that's still not even silly enough. And I was a big fan of art history growing up, and in particular, Leonardo da Vinci. Even in high school, in my senior year, I did this painting in Westbrook High, Go Blazers, the Westbrook High that had my tribute to Leonardo da Vinci and his inventions and stuff. So I just blurted out to Pete, what if we name one Leonardo and Michelangelo? And he laughed. He said, oh my God, that's great. And then Raphael. And so we had the first 3, and then it took about another 2 weeks of discussion, because he thought, he said Donatello was perfect, because we had now 3 of them with the O as the final vowel. And but I liked, Donatello was a sculptor, and I liked a sculptor named Bernini much better. And so we went back and forth for a while. Ended up with Donatello, but right. Donatello was almost named Bernini. So.
Bernini. I could have changed the course of history. Here's Bernini.
So that's where the names came from, and a bunch more extra information.
Great question. We'll go here, and then we'll hit this side afterwards.
Yeah.
So within the Ninja Turtle universe, I've watched it since the 80s, and you were absolutely amazing. You're the reason why my cartoons were amazing back in the 80s, so I want to thank you for that first.
Thank you.
As far as the book, The Last Ronin, what possessed you to decide to do a dark side of the Ninja Turtle series after all these years?
That's a great question, and if you don't know, actually, well, I'll explain. So Peter and I, when we were doing in the early years of the Turtles, because we were writing and drawing together, literally passing pages back and forth, and we had gotten to issue 11, and then within the context of that, we did 11 issues in a row, which wrapped up a bunch of large story arcs. And within that was another 4 issues, which featured an individual story on a particular turtle, so each of the 4 turtles. So it was basically 15 issues, which was kind of the foundation of all things in the turtle universe. As you know, we didn't know then, but it's been the basis for almost every version of the turtles since. And so we got to issue 11, and we said, God, where do we go from here? And so we kicked around a lot of different ideas. And then in brainstorming, we just said, well, let's try this. Let's look like 30 years down the road and see what might be the final turtle story. And then, so we said it in 2017, which is kind of funny at the time. So 1987 set in 2017. And so we said, well, we'll have this final, very dark sort of ending story. We wrap everything up. And that'll be our lighthouse to navigate towards, over time, and maybe we'll do that as a graphic novel together. And so that was in 1987, and that's literally the year we started working on the cartoons and the toys, and our world changed in that 1 year. We went from drawing probably 90 hours a week and doing 10% of our time doing business to the complete opposite. Now that we had characters that we created, we were now managing the entire turtle universe, business universe, and so we were just not getting time to draw very much and create, but because we were also overseeing the animated show, and which became the movies, we were designing a lot of the toys. So this concept kept getting pushed back and pushed back. It was 5 years, then 10 years, and then suddenly 20 years have gone by, and we just never had a chance to go back and do that story. And so over that period of time, I sold my rights to Peter. Peter sold his rights to Viacom. Viacom hired me to come back in 2010, and I started consulting on the comic series and the movies and some of that. And I just started working with the coolest, most awesome bunch of guys at IDW. Tom Walsh in particular is the head writer of the series, and these fantastic artists that are half my age. I'm not putting myself down, as the truth. They draw better than I do, and they really do. So I got this wonderful inspiration. So we started working through this series. So Tom and I started going like, well, if we get 12 issues, that'd be great. And so 12 issues, and it kept selling, so we did 24 issues. And by the time we get to issue 50, I was like, holy shit, this is great. And so we kept, so we plotted out to where we wanted to go to issue 100. And thanks to all the support of you guys, that we continued doing this wonderful 100-issue run of the Turtles. And we arrived at the same point in 2018 that Peter and I had arrived in 1987, where we just finished 100 issues. We wrapped up a massive storyline of multiple story arcs, and we were like, where do we go from here? And I said, well, I've got this 25-page outline that Peter and I wrote in 97, set in the future. Let's dust it off and look at it. And I ran it by Pete and said, this is what we want to do. And he's like, I'm retired, you do it, good luck. But so Tom and I then built out The Last Ronin, setting it a bit further in the future for the exact same reasons. Well, where do we go from here? Well, let's look 20 years in the future, give us a place to navigate towards. And then that became the most challenging, difficult, 2 years of sleepless nights. Tom and I worked on it night and day. I mean, we would still be writing dialogue sometimes on Sunday nights before I went to press on Mondays. Every issue was late. You guys were tremendous, supporting that. But it was the most gratifying because, to me, I wanted to pay respects for everything that Peter and I had started together. Because there are, everybody has a multiverse. Even the Turtles, if you think about it, back in the day, we had the black and white Turtles comics, we had the Turtles cartoon show, we had the movies, which was coming in between the cartoons and the comic. And so it was not anything new. I mean, multiverses have existed in comics forever. So we set this one kind of like in a Dark Knight universe within itself, but leaning heavily on what was the Mirage Studios universe that Pete and I did. And so we had the beginning and we wanted the end, and I wanted to pay respect to my awesome co-creator, Peter Ladd, to make it just perfect. And so we killed ourselves.
Yeah, we got it done. It's amazing.
But it was great. It was really fantastic. So
amazing.
Thanks.
Thank you. We'll go to the gentleman in blue here who's been waiting very patiently.
Yeah, I told you I talk a lot.
Yeah, right here. If you don't talk, there's no panel, my friend, so keep talking.
First of all, alongside Thundercats, thank you for building the foundation from my childhood and beyond.
Thank you.
How do you feel about the we're at 40 years now later. Ninja Turtle's still going strong, and especially with last year's video game release of Shredder's Revenge, which I thought was a fantastic throwback to TMNT 2, the arcade game, and TMNT 4 Turtles at the time.
It's the first word that always comes to mind to describe it to me is humbling, because it's really pretty mind-blowing. It's like, when Pete and I, you said when I referenced, my parents were afraid I'd never move out of the basement. I just built a bigger basement. No,
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. No, but having this childhood dream of becoming Jack Kirby, following in his footsteps and telling stories. Never thought I'd get that. When that happened and we were drawing comic books full time, that really was, the dream came true in every aspect for both Peter and I. And then it went on to, when we worked on the first 5 episodes of the cartoon show, we worked really hard on it. We changed things, we different colored bandanas, we softened it for a younger audience. There's no way this is gonna work. But we wanted to do the best we could and have fun doing it. And so then the cartoon show came out and it worked. And we went like, okay. And then the toys came out and it was the Christmas of '87. The first 5 episodes ran that Christmas break of 1987. And so then when the toys shipped in June of '88, we were like, we actually we live in Massachusetts at the time, we went down to Springfield. The closest KB toys were down there. And so we wanted to see that they actually were on the shelf, because we didn't think they were. And so Pete and I walk into the toy store, and as we get to the action figure section, just as we arrived there, this mom was dragging this young man out of the aisle saying, "No, I'm not buying you one of those stupid Ninja Turtles." And everything that worked. And when I think of the perfect storm of what Steve Barron, Jim Henson, what they did with that first movie was just mind-blowing. Because that could have just as easily failed. And even our agent, the guy that we worked with to help choreograph and build that part of the Turtle universe, he said, "All right, this is what's going to happen. You introduce the characters, and if it works, you'll get a second year, which would be a year where you save every penny, because you're going to sell a lot more toys and this and that. And then the third year, you're in the discount bins, and it's over. So you get a 3-year run, and you're good. That's out." And we said, "Fantastic. All right." And so it just kept going. And then suddenly, we were heading over 200 episodes of the cartoon show, and then there was a second movie and the third movie. And each time this happened, when we were in the middle of it, because we were still overseeing every aspect of our creation, you don't even notice it. And suddenly I went to the premiere of one of the Turtle movies in Paris. I'd never been to Paris. And I'm sitting there looking at the Eiffel Tower, and there's a poster for Tortue Ninja, the Turtles poster, next to my view of the Eiffel Tower, and you go, what is wrong with this planet? What? So each time that it continued to grow was really amazing to us, most of all. And so then when it sort of, went into a valley, we thought it was over in the mid-90s, and then it comes back in the early 2000s, where it's introduced to a whole new audience, and it just as easily could have failed. But suddenly the original fans came back, and we found new fans, and then that happened. And then, when I went back to work on it was around the time that Nickelodeon was putting together the 2012 series, which I adore. That series. It's fantastic. It's so crazy and weird and wacky, but it's done with such loving approach to all that came before. Cyril Neely, who headed up what was the Nickelodeon series, grew up in Philadelphia. His dad owned a pizza place called Antonio, so he spent most of his time reading Turtle comics, working in a pizza place. And he's drawing Turtles, and now he's executive, producer of all these Turtle episodes. So every time it happens and it continues, hits another generation, I always ask myself the same question people ask me, and they go, "Why?" And I go, "I don't know." and I looked, I watched the Seth Rogen trailer, and that's funny. I was like, I'm excited to see where that goes, because I think it's going to be sincerely funny. So it's really quite humbling when you think I've got to do not only the childhood dream for 40 years, and keeps going out here in Kansas City with you nice people talking Turtles.
And no more lobsters.
And no more
lobsters. No more lobsters.
Next lobsters will make them back.
Yes, I will go to your next. Your question.
Hello.
Hi.
I had a question because I like writing and all of that, so I was wondering, for someone who is beginning to create like their own world or just their own story, in your experience, is there anything that you have trouble dealing with still, or that you think you've mastered?
Did you just say the last part again? I just missed it. I'm a little deaf. Too much heavy metal music when I was a kid.
The last part of my question was, in your experience, is there anything that you feel like you still need to work on, or that you feel like you've mastered already?
That's a really good question, by the way. And the first time you realize that you've mastered everything, you lose everything. You never, honestly, and I'm not joking in that, it's, you always continue to grow, and as long as you can continue to grow and you get the opportunity to continue working at your craft, because I do get asked a lot when fans will come up to the table and they'll go, the question like you asked, he said, I'm an aspiring writer, or an aspiring artist, I'm this, how do I get from this side of the table to your side of the table? And I said, well, much like I touched on when I was talking about the evolution of the turtles, it's like, well, you're working a factory job, you're working at Starbucks, you're doing this, you're going to school, you have a social life, you have all this stuff going on. You've got to make time to work at what you are passionate about, whether it's sports or music or writing or drawing. So even if it's 20 minutes a day, make sure you set aside that time for yourself to do that and work at it. And I always say, as an artist, there's a great saying where all artists are thieves, and we are. Everything that I did, especially in the early days, and even now, is very much influenced. I've stolen it from somebody or inspired by somebody, if I want to be, politically, or say it in a nicer way. But the fact is, it's like, a great example is the creation of Casey Jones. Came out in '85. In 1986, I saw this movie called Big Trouble in Little China. Kurt Russell.
John Carpenter.
Yeah, John Carpenter. So Kurt Russell plays this character called Jack Burton, and I fell off my chair laughing. This is the funniest movie, and I've never written Casey Jones since without thinking, what would Jack Burton do? And so you pull these influences, things that you love, whether it's Star Wars or Star Trek or whatever these influences, and you are passionate, and even like a lot of my early drawings were tracings of other artists, and that's how I learned to draw Jack Kirby trees and Barry Smith figures and stuff, and that eventually molds into your own style as you sort of become more acclimated to drawing and creating yourself. But don't, there are no stupid ideas. Don't throw anything away. Work on it every day, and then and write it for yourself. Because most of the stuff, and even when we got through the most recent 100 issues of Turtles, one thing I loved about working with Tom Wallace is Tom was like me, it's story first, and we wrote those books for us. We hoped that you guys would like them, but that was our only barometer, because at the end of the day, we weren't going to go, well, if we kill a character, maybe we could sell a few more copies, or maybe we do something, this, we can do something else. It's sort of, it had to work for us, period, and hopefully it would. So true to yourself, spend your time on your craft, and stick with it, and don't give up. Okay? Cool.
Thank you. Great advice. Let's go to the back over here.
We'll get to you.
Yep. We'll work our way back up.
So Zog and the Triceratons are some of my favorites. And I'm just curious, whose idea was Zog originally, and where did the Triceratons come from, and all that?
It's a great question. No, it's Peter Laird, 100%. And one of the things I loved about, so many things about Peter as an artist, and a creator and a collaborator, and things that we did is that, he was older than I. He was 8 years older than I. So when we first met, he could draw much better than I could, and I learned a lot from him. And he was one of those guys I used to say that if you look at the original cover of Turtles issue 4, it's this transportation device that sends the turtles into outer space. And it's this big wraparound cover with all this machinery, and to me, it looks like it could work, and he was so good at robots and this kind of stuff. And so when we would kick ideas, it was just one funny thing would lead to another funny thing and stuff. And so we were trying to come up with the perfect bad guys for the space opera that we're doing, which is, trying to rip off all our favorite Star Wars things without getting sued by George Lucas. And so I said, well, who did come off the bad guy? And he's a big dinosaur nut, and he loves Triceratops. And so he did this couple sketches of this Triceraton, warrior, and I was like, oh my God, not only are these the hardest thing to draw ever, all the time, this is the greatest idea ever. So yeah, so that's where that stuff came from, and it really was something that, like I touched on earlier, something we wrote for ourselves, and we made us laugh, and we thought it was, but I love that, those guys, and I love that they've shown up in almost every version of the Turtles. It's pretty spectacular. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Mike with the mic is over
Mike
there.
with the mic right there in the
Hi, Kevin. Hey, thank you for everything you did. It's impacted my childhood, and my kids now love Ninja Turtles, so that's why we're here.
Yeah, awesome, thank you.
But anyways, is there a certain origin to all the weapons for each of the Ninja Turtles, and how did that come about, and how did you guys decide between each one?
No, that's a great question, and it was the evolution is fascinating in that to me, because when we did the original Turtle comics, they were in black and white, and so even the first color cover I did of the Turtles, which was issue 5, the first printing of issue 5 was smaller, comic book size, and I did this wraparound painting of them in a Star Wars cantina, and they all had red bandanas, but the interior was still black and white, and so for Peter and I, it was an extension to build out their personalities by the weapons that we had each of them use. And so Raphael, for example, was kind of our Wolverine. Like he's that berserker, the guy you always want on your side in a fight. And so the size are very a close-up combat weapon. So that just fit his personality. Michelangelo was our more laid-back kind of jokester. And to me, if you've ever tried to use nunchucks yourself, it's really funny. And how many times you hit yourself in the head and go, why am I doing it? So it just sort of fit his personality. Donatello being the technical turtle, you want that personality in your group to help problem solve. And so a bow staff is more traditionally a monk's weapon, or a pacifist type of thing. So that all these things bled over into the cartoon show, like Michelangelo's orange bandana, funny. Raphael's red, we kept an original red. Donatello's purple bandana with the bow staff sort of suited his personality. And then with Leonardo, the katanas, the swords, it's a very highly skilled technical weapon, like a samurai, and so the royal sort of samurai bluish color with the weapons sort of fit the character we designed to be more of the leader. And so they were chose with specificity so that we could help visually extend or show their personalities at a glance in the black and white comics.
Thank you.
And then they make cartoons and they're eating
Pizza.
with anchovies and jelly beans.
Yeah.
First of all, again, thank you for everything you've done for my childhood. It's an amazing childhood, and a lot of it's due to you guys. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Just curious on how much creative control you guys have over the newer generation of the Turtles coming out, the new shows, the new characters, such as the female Turtles and things like that. And what are some of your thoughts on that?
The great question too is the evolution of the control of the Turtles started. Ground Zero was Peter and I, and that was probably the first 15 years from '84 to the mid '90s. In '97, '98, I had sold I showed half of my rights, what I owned to the Turtles, which was creative controlling interest to Pete, because it was actually, at that time, there was nothing going on with the Turtles. It was really in this valley, and I bought Heavy Metal Magazine, and I was working on a bunch of different other comic stories and ideas. But all the original cartoon shows, all the original movies, every single license, everything that anybody saw, even those Hostess cream pies, everything stupid, all that stuff. We saw it, we worked on it, we approved it, we were part of that process. Working with the writers of the animated shows and being on set for the movies. It was so much fun, but it was also 15 solid years of 90 hours a week work. And so I sold my controlling interest to Pete, and then later in the early 2000s, mid-2000s, I sold the balance after we had worked on had developed a project with Kevin Monroe, a director named Kevin Monroe, who did this wonderful 2007 movie. It was an animated feature. And so then Peter took over everything, but then three years later, he just kind of was like, okay, it was hard enough with 2 people, it's even harder on my own, and so then he sold all of his rights to Viacom, and then Viacom, as they started ramping up the movies and the cartoon shows and the comics, as they licensed out each aspect of that to different parts of the company, I kept getting calls for me to come back and work on the Turtle stuff, and I was excited. I had now a nice long break from, not that I liked the Turtles any less or anything like that. It was just nice to take a break and do something else creatively. And then I was invited back to work on the cartoon show and just had a blast with those guys. And I spent almost all my time working on the comics because that was where the Turtles started. So that's my most passionate is with the comics. I was hired by Michael Bay to consult on his movies, which, as far as I can tell, everything I suggested he should do was the perfect reason for him to do the exact opposite. I saw the early drawings and I said, do not make him 7 foot tall, bulletproof with noses. So that he listened, obviously, as you know. So there was parts of the next evolution of what they want to do with those movies, which to me, it's like when you hand off your idea to a creative person, even in the early days of the comics, sometimes we'd have a guest writer come in and a guest artist come in, and they had the basic parameters, they had the Turtle universe, and so I said, write the stories within the context of what you know, and if you do something really off base, we'll adjust, but otherwise, we want you to have that creative freedom to tell the story you want to tell. So there were some really great parts of the 2014 and 2016 movies. We get to see Bebop and Rocksteady for the first time, and Krang and all this stuff. They weren't, in my opinion, the best movies as far as being thought out, and as they could have been choreographed a bit better. So there's, then you had Turtles versus Batman, which I thought was a great animated movie. And just looking at, I just saw the trailer the same as you guys. Nickelodeon is, I want to say hands down, is so respectful and so decent. And they're always they don't have to ask my input on anything. They don't, they own the Turtles. But they always do, and they're very thoughtful, and they're very respectful and very appreciative, and I appreciate it. But with the Seth Rogen project, for example, they said, Seth's a big fan, and he's this, and he's got a vision of the story he wants to tell, and I said, then he should. And when I saw the trailer the same as you guys when it dropped, I was like, that's really funny. I had not seen any designs, I didn't have any input on the script. So when they say, what do you like about different Turtle visions of people had of the Turtles over the years from the different movies, to me, the first movie is the best and will always be the best. Nothing beats that. That's the high watermark. Everything else is a barometer of, I like that one a little less, I like that one a little more, but I like them all for what they bring to the table. 2007's Kevin Monroe project was great. Turtles Forever was really funny. I love that one. So it's amazing to see. It's just crazy to think, it's 40 years of Turtles, and there's a whole new Turtle movie coming out. It's crazy, right? So I'm excited. I'm very excited. But I love the fact that all of my time on Turtles is spent on the creative side. So I work on the comics, and Tom Waltz and I are working on an extension of Lost Years, which is an extension of Last Ronin. That's going to roll out this year, and then we'll carry on into Last Ronin 2, which will start later this year. Which is, you guys are gonna dig it. If you're following that series, you're really gonna like, because they basically wrote Tom and I a blank check, so to speak, and just said, do what you did the first time around, and so they're letting us.
Okay.
So.
All right. Okay.
No, but it's really exciting that because the same thing Nickelodeon could just as well be, because I've seen it happen too many times when something becomes popular and they go like, oh, well, let's you guys did it all on your own and it was really great. How about we add a whole bunch more people to the mix and try to help you fix it? Yeah. Which never works out. No. So no, they've been.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be fixed.
Yeah.
Great question. Mike, did you find someone over here? Let's get. let's get this gentleman over here. He's been.
We're working this way. I think we're probably coming up on time.
Probably
Yep,
the
we
last-
got it, yep.
The last one.
No, I say like,
Yeah, 8
save the
minutes.
best for last.
Yeah.
So it's fine. So,
Your
what's
question.
What's your favorite pizza? No, okay.
Not quite that obvious. I was curious. Fistful of Blood. Is there any plans to write a book similar in style to that again?
To which one again?
Fistful of Blood.
Oh, Fistful of Blood. That was so much fun. Yes. You know, it's funny, and he's referring to. It's a great question too. Things that I got to do. In 1977, I discovered a magazine called Heavy Metal Magazine, which was a comic book magazine that, for the first time, a lot of audiences in the U.S. got to see a lot of really amazing European cartoonists, Belial and Mobius, and people that doing stuff that was just mind-blowing because they weren't repressed by the Comics Code Authority, which kept comics through the 60s and early 70s regulated to just 12 years old. They literally had a comics code rating system that you couldn't do comics with any content anymore that they deemed any more dangerous than a 12-year-old should read. And so you get to experience all these amazing European storytellers and artists, and there was also a lot of comic artists in the States, Bernie Wrightson, Richard Corbin, Vaughn Bodie, that were regulated to underground comics because they couldn't get jobs at Marvel and DC, which were the mainstream stuff. And so it really broadened my horizons to this whole other world of telling stories. And so projects that I worked on around that time, which is one called Melting Pot, which is this kind of space sci-fi fantasy adventure thing. And another one was I did a couple I love zombie movies when I was a kid. I remember my dad took us to see Apple Dumpling Gang when we were kids, the Portland Twin Drive-In. And so this side of the drive-in was showing Apple Dumpling Gang, but out the back window they were showing Night of the Living Dead, and I was out the back window watching that. So Fistful of Blood was a love poem to zombies and vampires and all those things, and we did it for Heavy Metal Magazine, well, it's 20 years ago. And so I've written 2 sequels to it, but it's just been, at some point maybe I'll get to that, it'd be funny. And just to answer the question, my favorite pizza is our family favorite pizza, is Hawaiian pizza with jalapenos on it. Try it, it's right here.
All right, so pineapple on pizza, good.
What's that?
Pineapple on pizza, good. Thumbs up. You want to grab one more? Or?
Do we done? Okay.
Done? Okay, go. All right.
Mike with the mic is shutting us down.
All right.
When Mike drops a mic, he's serious.
Yeah. You're here all weekend?
Yes.
Okay. All right. We'll come see you. You know your booth number? Or, you'll look for the long line. Yeah, you'll find the and the turtles.
Yeah, we're next to Shatner. We're just gonna. Our job is to enjoy him and annoy him the whole.
Oh yeah.
No, we're not.
He's easily annoyed, so it's all good. It's all good. Yeah. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you. Well, first I want to thank you, but I just want to say.
Yes.
I wouldn't be up here if you guys weren't sitting there. I have the best fans ever, so I have the best job ever. Thank you so much. Always love seeing you. Been a huge fan of the show.
You too.
I really appreciate hanging out with me. Like I said, I talk too much. It's just Kansas City.
Kevin Eastman, everybody. Kevin Eastman. Go see him all weekend.